agreed to come for the face-to-face classes. After all the consultations, we were supposed to student shifting model that we would be using and the number of students per shifting cycle. So the 4-term cycle that we adopted was 4 days in campus, and during that time, the students should be able to finish all of the clinical requirements. But these were all under the no patient policy. These students had already experience with patients before the pandemic struck. And so they were just not able to complete some of the clinical requirements. So during these 4 days that they would be on campus, they will have to complete all the clinical requirements that they have not been able to complete. And after the 10 days in campus, then they have 10 days off campus under quarantine. And at this time, they will continue to work with virtual clinical procedures and supervise the continuing supervision by the clinical instructors. All of this done online. And at that time, they're also asked clinicians and clinical instructors alike to monitor for signs and symptoms of COVID-19 during the 10 days of quarantine. Where was I? The health and safety protocols. The health and safety protocols, the testing. Yes, faculty and technicians, security and janitorial staff were all required to have negative RT-PCR tests 3 to 5 days prior to the start of face-to-face classes, and negative antigen test result every week thereafter if they continue to come to teach and to be the support staff. Students, however, were also required to have a negative RT-PCR test result 3 to 5 days prior to initial entry. And on terms of vaccination, all our faculty, technicians, security, and janitorial staff were vaccinated. And the students were all given certificates of participation in F2F classes so that they can show this to the LGUs so that they may be prioritized for vaccination. And 74% of our students who came for the face-to-face classes were all vaccinated. What else? Insurance. Our faculty, technicians, security, and janitorial staff had their own insurance, but we also have hospitalization subsidy from CEU. On the part of the students, according to the Joint Memorandum Circular, should have PhilHealth or equivalent medical insurance with coverage for medical expenses related to COVID-19. So these are just a few of the safety protocols that were established. There were many others. In terms of transportation, the faculty and the support staff had to have their own vehicle, or they can share with others, or they can ride a bike or motorbike to work. The students also the same thing, their own private transportation or walk going to campus. Otherwise, if they cannot do that, they have to stay in the nearby dormitory. And the mode of transport has to be approved by the Office of the Student Affairs. They're not allowed to use public transportation. In terms of accommodations, those students who had to stay in dormitories had to stay only in university-accredited dormitories. And we are glad that even before the pandemic, we had a partner in accrediting this dormitory. And they accredit dormitories, especially in the University Belt. And these are some of the dormitory rooms that were used and accredited by Rental B. The school to home transport of the students were very closely monitored. Before they come to school, they have to report to their faculty. And they were assigned, some groups, some students were assigned to particular faculty. They have to report first to their faculty to indicate the status of their health at that time before they go to school. And when they go to school, of course, the usual screening. When they return to their houses, to their homes, or to their dorms, they have to call again the faculty and tell them that we are here, we're back in our dorms or at home. That was really bantay sarado, as we would say in Filipino, in terms of monitoring our students for them to be safe in going to and from school and home. And of course, the students were supposed to bring their own PPEs, their own dental materials and gadgets, their lunch and water and utensils. They take lunch inside at their own spot where they are assigned in the clinics. They don't take lunch with other students. They also have to bring, of course, their personal hygiene kit. And finally, when we were ready, we were visited by the CHED evaluation team, including representatives from the Department of Health and the local government unit. And here is our chairman of the Commission on Higher Education, Chairman De Vera, inspecting the dental models, the typodonts that we were going to be using, and our Dean, Dean Pearly Lim, explaining the use of these. And finally, we were able to get our authority to conduct face-to-face classes. The authority given to us after the dentistry was also for medtech and nursing. And, here they are now, our students in the well-ventilated rooms. We're very fortunate in CEU Manila that our clinics are very well ventilated. So originally, when we fixed these rooms, we had barriers between chairs. When the team of CHED visited, they advised us to remove the barriers because anyway, the rooms was very well ventilated. And at that time, there was more knowledge about how the coronavirus rather, is transmitted. And so it was recommended that we remove those barriers. So our clinics have no barriers. They are well ventilated, however. And there is, of course, distancing between the students working in their own specific spots. And here are some examples of some of the things that the students did. So this model have the dental caries there that the students are supposed to polish and clean in a model perio Joe. This is for the periodontic section. This is for the restorative dentistry section where the students prepare the model tooth for fillings and then the light curing that follows. And they were also expected to be able to do tooth extraction both from the upper and lower jaws. And I have a very short video here of that tooth extraction that's being done. There you are, done for our students. Sorry. Now I just want to say that following the Swiss cheese model of COVID-19 prevention, this is what is important. The cheese model that I am presenting here is not about the protective mechanisms, but rather about the institutions involved in face-to-face classes. First of all, the Commission on Higher Education and Department of Health giving us the general guidelines, and then the Centro Escolar University community implementing and making operational those guidelines. And the entire university was involved. The health service unit of the university, the security department, the janitors, the Office of Student Affairs, were also involved, and of course, the entire School of Dentistry, headed by Dean Pearly Lim, also did their part. And the parents also had a very important role in seeing to it that their children were also had the correct protection, and the students themselves. And that was very important. It's very important that the students are ready and are able to do their part in seeing to it that they can do the face-to-face classes safely. And, well, ligtas, pwede ba? Ligtas ba? As they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And finally, after starting June 6 up to the first week of August, the School of Dentistry was able to complete 6 batches of students, totaling 212 students. Each batch had a maximum of 38 students because that's the maximum number of students that our clinics can accommodate at any one time. And we were very glad, really, that all remained COVID-free during the cycle that they were in. So finally, we will have a virtual graduation for them on September 25, later this month. A special graduation. We don't usually have graduation in September, but we are very glad that they had finished, and I'm sure they're also very glad that they have finished, so we would like to celebrate with them. And we really targeted that they finish at this time so that hopefully the Board of Dentistry of PRC will be able to conduct its licensure examination in December 2021, and our students will be able to take the exam. And we really pray and hope that they will all pass the exam. And well, as the first question was, ligtas ba? May kasiguruhan ba? Talagang kailangan lang sobrang ingat sa bawat isa. Bawal talaga ang makalingap at gawin ang lahat ng kaya. The rest, let the Lord take care of the rest. And of course, from our experience, what we can say is that success comes from group effort, fueled by the commitment of each individual. And we thank the CEU community, the CEU team, for being able to do this and being able to allow our students to finally graduate and complete their studies. Thank you very much. Thank you again for allowing us to do this sharing.
Thank you very much. That's Dr. Cristina Padulina of Central Scholar University, and another amazing presentation. You know, I've been listening to the 3, and I think if we get all the good practices of your 3 schools, we'll probably have a almost perfect face-to-face kind of training for our young health professionals or aspiring health professionals. Okay, so thank you very much, ma'am. Please join us in the panel discussion, and you can see all the congratulations and thanks on the chat box. Marami ring nakikinig mula sa CE. Okay, Raymond, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Padolina. Really wonderful presentation. And looks like, very well loved. Marami po talagang nag-attend from CEU, ma'am. Just based on the messages from the chat po. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Opo. Maraming salamat po sa pag-imbita sa inyong mga estudyante at faculty po. So next up, we will have 2 very, very quick reactions from 2 students po. One with a background in medicine and another po a background in dentistry. She is from the UP College of Medicine class of 2022. Dr. Rani Ailina Domingo, and also one from the Central Escolar University's Dentistry Compass chapter, Dr. Daniel Luis Puspos. So let's call on Dr. Domingo first for her reaction.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sir Raymond. First of all, I would also like to thank the other speakers who presented their protocols and their guidelines when it comes to their face-to-face classes. So we certainly learned a lot, and we, as mentioned by Dr. Susie a while ago, we can consolidate all the good practices so that we can we can surely perform face-to-face for all of the students in the Philippines. So as a reaction, I would also just like to correlate what was mentioned and discussed a while ago to what happened with our batch during our internship year. So I'm currently an intern on my last year of medical education. And before we started face-to-face classes, we had to go through several steps in order to ensure that we are safe and that our patients are also safe when we start performing procedures or when we start interacting with them in the hospital. So first, prior to everything, before we even started our duties on our physical classes, we had mask fitting. So this was alongside the orientation that was prepared for us. And this was done to ensure that all of our masks, all our personal protective equipment were aligned or properly allocated in terms of its fit to us. So this also ensures that highest standards of precautionary measures are met throughout our stay in the hospital and in the college. So this is also alongside the point of CHED a while ago, where they mentioned about the higher educational institution instituting precautionary measures to protect its students. So for our case, we had different precautionary measures, mainly mask fit testing, provision of proper PPE supplies, and ensuring that we are all negative in RT-PCR swabs before allowing us to go back to face-to-face classes. So our testing was also done across all of us. So all in the batch, we had to ensure that no one tested positive, and we also followed CHED's guidelines and protocols about students having to test 3 to 5 days prior to the start of their classes. So if students were not able to achieve this deadline or meet this timeline, they were not allowed to go back to their classes, even if they already had scheduled activities for that day. So aside from proper PPE provision and mask fit testing, prior to the start of our actual face-to-face interactions, we had bridging programs, as mentioned by Chancellor Padilla a while ago. So for our first-year medical students, they had anatomy bridging programs where they had dissections in batches to ensure that social distancing is followed and that transmission, if possible, is prevented and limited throughout their bridging dissection program. For us interns, we also had this bridging program, which is more on the skills training to properly prepare us in terms of how we will manage our patients in the ward, how we will perform procedures, and how we will interact with our patients who we will care for throughout our internship year. So for our batch of interns, since we weren't able to have as much physical classes and interactions with patients before due to the pandemic and the lockdowns instituted last year, we found the training sessions and the skills training programs very helpful for us, since we weren't just thrown out in the wards and in the hospital without proper knowledge or prior knowledge of what we needed to do for our patients. So before our face-to-face classes, we had bridging programs to complement or to supplement our existing knowledge and to ensure that we will be able to take care of our patients the right way and in the way that they deserve. So this is also similar to what about what All Food did with their mannequins. So this is a nice springboard for when students go to face-to-face classes, because since we are stuck in our homes for the past 1.5 years, we need to freshen up our skills and we need to brush up on the procedures and how to manage our patients. So bridging programs is very beneficial in terms of easing in transition between virtual learning and face-to-face learning for the students. So this is so the appreciation of the students for this is certified by the 80 to 90% attendance for both summer programs. So the first year students had out of the 190 first year students, approximately 150 students joined the session. And for us, for the interns, almost all were able to attend the training programs, aside from the ones that who needed to be canceled because of other logistical reasons. So aside from that, our duty schedules also needed to be shifted or to be changed in terms of so that it can adapt to the COVID situation in our hospital. So before, we would have lots of students in the hall rooms, lots of students on their posts, but now the rotations in our departments had to divide every block into separate posts. For example, some students would first go into telemedicine, the others would be in the wards, and for surgical fields, they would allot other students in the surgical operating room. So in this way, we can ensure that no specific area in the hospital is crowded of people, and that proper social distancing is practiced as well as other precautionary measures. So this is also in tune with what CEU did in terms of them having their students go into batches and making sure that all of the students have certain quarantine periods before going back to their face-to-face classes. So for us, since we had a lot of students, I think we are 300 plus in our batch. Like I mentioned, we just had to divide them into different posts to ensure that no area in the hospital is crowded with students at any given time. So aside from that, for our face-to-face classes, we also had different systems or levels in place to ensure that all the students and the faculty are safe, are protected, or well accounted for. And this is correlated with what Chancellor Padilla mentioned a while ago in terms of having us accomplish the UPM Best twice a day. So as mentioned a while ago, the UPM Best is an application where us students can log in our temperatures, our exposures, if there is any, and any symptoms that we experience throughout our duties or our physical classes. So the UPM Best is ideally answered twice a day to ensure that before going to classes, we are asymptomatic, we don't have exposures, and after classes, we also can check whether we are exposed, we have developed any new onset of symptoms, and we can report as needed. So what's good about the application is that this is connected directly with our immediate superiors, and the committees in charge of the students are regularly notified if some students are exposed or are presenting asymptomatic. So aside from that, I think the CEU also has this system of close monitoring for their students, and this is also evident in our setting because of the multiple levels that we have in terms of safety precautions. So we have student safety officers. So we have among our classmates, we have block officers. That's aside from the class officers, and these officers work hand in hand to ensure and to monitor the COVID status of the class to ensure that everyone is able to report whatever symptoms they feel or whatever exposures they experience throughout their duty schedules. So the student safety officers also coordinate with resident coordinators, since we are also working hand in hand with them in terms of managing our patients in the wards. So aside from our student coordinators, our resident coordinators, we also have consultant coordinators in the department to ensure that everything is coordinated, and we have a top-down approach to reporting symptomatic students or those who might need quarantine, isolation, or swabbing purposes if needed. So I think a notable part of our education right now during our internship year is our exposure to the community. So aside from being deployed to the hospitals, we are also deployed to the community partners of the UP PGH and the UPCM. So aside from all the other things I've mentioned a while ago, we also have mandatory swabbing prior to the deployment to these communities to ensure that we are safe going into the said communities, and if at any point in our rotation there, we become symptomatic, we are immediately pulled out to be assessed, and to ascertain that other students aren't exposed unnecessarily. So in the communities and also in the hospitals, we are on high alert if someone gets exposed, and we coordinate directly with our faculty and our staff to ensure that the proper management is done in terms of whether they need quarantine, isolation, or swabbing as needed. So I think what this webinar shows is that the good points presented earlier by our esteemed administrators can all be used to ensure that face-to-face classes is done across, if not all students, across the health professional sector. And to answer the question if face-to-face classes is ligtas or safe and if it can be done, yes, I would like to say that yes, it can be done as long as the proper systems are in place to ensure that the students, the faculty, the staff, and everyone involved in the delivery of medical education is safe, protected, and well accounted for throughout their entire stay during face-to-face classes. So that's all for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rani. Really just an example po no, of everything that you have experienced to date bilang you are an intern right now. Okay, moving on po to the dentistry background po. No? May we call on Dr. Dan Puspos for
Good
the
afternoon
reaction.
po.
Yun, here
Thank
we
you,
go.
Dr. Raymond.
Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
Good afternoon po, and thank you. Thank you po, Dr. Raymond, as well as to the presenters for sharing all the safety practices. And after reaction, to be honest, before going into face-to-face classes, we all had initial hesitation. At least because dentists were one of those with the highest risk associated with COVID. And putting but education must be resumed. Pause in education is too much, especially on supposed to be graduating students who were already done with lecture classes and left with only clinical requirements. Although some of the clinical requirements were made flexible by offering virtual clinics, there are still other procedures needed to be done face-to-face. Now, good thing, limited face-to-face was almost ready to be facilitated during that time. And transition from averting risk to managing risk was almost welcome. And facilities were retrofitted to accommodate new protocols and ensure the safety of everyone who participated. And after the approval, face-to-face classes was non-compulsory offered, first to the graduating class. Now, before the first batch, several online meetings were conducted explaining the protocols according to both CHED and CE, which were both reassuring. Many factors were addressed, such as accommodation, transportation, and even the procedures to be done. And choices within those parameters of the approved protocol were given. Also, vaccination was not mandatory, but it was highly encouraged, and testing was strictly implemented. Everyone was required to get RT-PCR tests few days prior to the start of the program, and logs were required prior to entering and leaving the school. Now, inside the infirmary, proper PPEs worn as they enter the infirmary, and no patients were allowed. Only senior clinicians were accepted as they've already experienced interaction with real and alive patients. Distance was also observed between clinicians, and windows were kept open to ensure unrestricted airflow, and contact with each other was severely limited. Now, upon reaching our accommodation or houses, we were also required to send a confirmation email to ensure the safety of the hotel. This was mentioned earlier by Dr. Padolina as Bantay Sarado. And overall, the translation of these protocols in real life. Personally, I think the protocols were properly set, and face-to-face classes could be possible. It is up to the clinicians and everyone involved on how it will be implemented and followed. We should not be afraid and learn how to deal with what we are facing right now. And we can never fully avoid the risk, but it can definitely be managed. And that's it for my reaction po.
Hey, thank you very much. That's
Sige, can I just say a little
Okay, go ahead.
thing? Dr. Dan Puspos is one of those who will graduate in September, and he is graduating with honors, magna cum laude.
Wow. Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
Dan is Vice President for Dentistry Compass Chapter of Centro Escolar, and congratulations. Magna cum laude in dentistry. Iba yun. Raymond, ano, mahirap abutin yan. Okay, so congratulations. I'm sure your parents are very proud of you, and your president of the university is so proud of you. Okay, we're now going into our panel discussion, and I would like to call on all our speakers. So we'll have Attorney Cindy, we have Chancellor Menchit, we have Carol from Our Lady of Fatima, and of course Dr. Cristina Padolina, and our two students, Rani and Dan. But before we start our panel discussion, we have our usual public service announcement from TVUP. TVUP, take it away.
Bayad po. Salamat po.
Mama, bayad po. Naku, anak. Tabi mo na yan. Para masuklihan ko ang mga sakripisyo na sa taong bayan.
Mapagbigay po kayo. Nakikita kong mahal na mahal ninyo ang inyong pamilya.
Tama ka. Kaya nag-aalala ako. Paano ba matapos itong pandemyang to?
Para matapos, umpisahan na ninyo. Magpabakuna na kayo.
Dahil mahal ko kayo, magpapabakuna ako.
Yan. Very, very nice public service announcement po, no? So we are really going through all of our inventory of public service announcements, and this is just one of the many outputs of the UP research entitled Communicating COVID-19 in Post-Quarantine Philippines. The project is headed by our UP Vice President for Public Affairs, Dr. Elena Pernia, and funded by the DOST-PCHRD and the Department of Health under the AHED HSPR project. Okay, let's start the ball rolling, Dr. Susie.
Okay, thank you very much, Raymond. And thank you so much to all our speakers and to our students for excellent presentations. I think you'll see in the chat box, and we have lots of questions also in our Q&A box. But let me just sort of start out by saying that, in the 1917 Great Influenza pandemic, when all hell broke loose, right, when all their health systems collapsed, nurses were actually being kidnapped because, if people couldn't get into hospitals and they had to be like outside or in their homes, it became a very desperate situation. That's why when I started thinking about this topic and we were discussing it last week, I said, this is really a very serious problem. I think we're looking at so many aspects of the pandemic, but we're not really looking at how we're going to replenish our health human resources, right? So there are a number of good questions in the chat box, but let me start by asking everyone, if you had, sorry, I don't want to make a political commentary, but I guess I will, right? We're hearing of a lot of money that's not been spent. Okay, if some money went to, just a fraction of that money they're talking about could go to medical, nursing, dentistry, allied medical professions, education. What do you think is the priority intervention? What should it be spent on? If we want to make sure, because I think this is really serious, no? You're making taking extraordinary steps. Actually, one of the questions in the chat, and we'll get to that in a bit, right, is that, does this mean that tuition will increase? Because it's like the burden of resuming education is falling on the laps of our administrators. They're brilliant, they're innovative, they're creative, but you heard Menchit Padilla, she said she had to spend millions just to retrofit the dentistry, the College of Dentistry, and so on and so forth. So I think the question is, over the long haul, if you had unlimited resources, let's say at least 1 billion of the multiple billions that have not been spent, what should be the priority for medical education, for education of the health professionals? And I'm going to start with our executive director from CHED. What do you think of this? Go ahead, Cindy, Attorney Cindy. Okay, Raymond, did we lose Attorney Cindy?
I'm looking for her, but
Okay, let's go to Menchit, Chancellor Padilla. You first.
Well, if you compare our situation with other countries wherein the herd immunity is a lot better, they've been able to sort of go back to the normal situation. So if, let's say, if we're just talking, I'm not even talking about education, I'm talking about generality. So that's one angle we're in. We've got to protect our health workers and the population so that we can go back to the normal life. If you're just talking about education per se, I mean, my campus is so small, but if I had the luxury and I had a bigger land with a lot of dormitories, I would love to bubble. As a matter of fact, the rector got at one point, the two of us were sort of like thinking like, how could we bubble, UP Manila Region? And it's difficult. So that means it's nice, but it's impossible. So we have to go to the next best thing. So, but if you were to plan for the next pandemic, I think, I really, many of the things we're doing now already in preparation for the next pandemic, we've got to come up with things wherein if this happens again, then we should have the proper environment wherein education should not stop. I'll end there.
Right, nice. Okay, let's go to Carol. Carol, what do you think?
Well, first, Susie, I would take care of my people first and my students. So if I could have the funding, I would put it in vaccinations. And then secondly, I would put it in technology. Moving forward, your barriers and everything else, but you have to think beyond COVID-19. The way to go is post-COVID, what happens to education? Will we be safer? Will we have permutations? Will we have hybrid learning? So I would go for technology and find ways by which I could deliver education correctly on-site, off-campus, remotely at the same time.
Okay, thanks a lot. Dr. Cristina Padrina, go ahead.
Yes, very similar to what Carol said. We blended learning, the use of technology, I think is here to stay. And we have to improve our facilities on that. And I really wish that our government would help not only public funded institutions, but also private institutions like Carol's and mine, CEU and Fatima and all the others. We really need that technology for more, to be able to do more simulations so that their students will have a more efficient time when they actually do clinics with patients and all. They will be more prepared, and I think that they will need to spend less time with patients. So that's number one. Improve the internet connectivity all over the Philippines. Right? Why can't we do that? I think it is possible if the commitment is there. And yes, testing, free testing, and more vaccines for all our students and also our faculty and staff. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. I mean, I agree with you. I agree with you completely. I think, there should be no distinction between public and private schools, because at the end of the day, we need both to produce our nurses, our doctors, our dentists, and so on. And I can only imagine that the burden that you have in the private sector is that this gets passed down to the students and to the families as well. No? So we're not going to ask the question of tuition right now, but I think this is a problem that we can already see bubbling up now. If this becomes, if this continues, then kaya I started by saying kinikidnap yung mga nurse noong 1970. We cannot afford to lose. We already are understaffed in terms of human resources, health human resources in the Philippines. We do not have the numbers that we need. And if we have less, can you imagine what kind of another disaster this is, not beyond the economic disaster? So okay, let's listen to our students. Let's start with Rani. Rani, what do you think?
For me, ma'am, if we were given enough resources to cover for what we want to prioritize, I would stick with the principle of prevention being better than cure, in the sense of adequate provision of PPEs for all our students. Because being in the medical field, being in the field, being in the health professional field, we need to move forward and adapt to technology, and we need to start learning how to incorporate technology to our education. But we also cannot do away with face-to-face exposure and interaction with patients. So we need to ensure that when our students go to the wards, to the communities, that they are safe, they are secure, they have proper protections within them using PPEs and other systems in place. And we need to strengthen our system, our environment, to make sure that we can sustain the protection of our staff, our students in the long run. So I think I also agree with allocating funds for vaccination for our students, for our faculty, but also for our patients. Since we also interact with them and they also need as much support as they can. Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, thank you very much, Rani. Dan, what do you think, Dan?
You muted, Dan.
For me, in dentistry, we have two divisions. We have didactics and our clinical skills training. So I would divide, if ever given, a huge amount of money to those two. Now, in terms of didactics, just like what Dr. Padrina said, internet access must be supported. We should have reliable connection, enough bandwidth, mobile data, and sometimes even load. And of course, how to access that kind of materials online. We need to have also access to gadgets. It could either be provided, loaned, or even just a support could be given. As well as technical support for both teachers and students in setting up lectures and accessing materials for online consumption. And emotional support for the impact of the transition to online learning, just what like Dr. Carmen Padilla said. And in terms of clinical skills training, I think we should focus on clinics being retrofitted to the highest standard by giving negative air pressure, HEPA filters, which aims to prevent aerosols that are generated during patient care and avoid infection, highest level of PPEs, and also dental chairside training for proper guidance, like portable handpieces and typodons. And also, we should have scheduled access to campus for simulation activity, but all must be within a bubble. And in the bubble, accommodation, transportation should always be taken in consideration, and thus comes in the financial assistance for these students who are really into pursuing this career in health profession. Also, pre, during, and post face-to-face support must be given to everyone who attends. And lastly, assistance in worst-case scenario in conducting movement. And if supplies and money were not a problem, I think procuring more vaccines and allow more allied health professionals to administer for faster dissemination can really help solve the problem of COVID. So I think those are the things wherein I will spend money on if given the unlimited budget.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan and Rani. It's almost like you guys need to be appointed to be head of a task force for continuing education. You have very good ideas and I think very practical. And ito na nga sinasabi natin, di ba? Para sa pandemya, lahat ng talino kailangan gamitin natin because it is not just about counting the numbers and testing people or providing services. We have to think about how this health system runs. And it cannot run without good, well-trained health professionals. Okay, over to you, Raymond.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Susie. I'll just, we have nearly 100% po, no,